everyone, and welcome to Emotional Grit, the podcast where you can learn about the power of perspective and the science that fuels us. I'm your host, Jennifer Fernjack, and I'm grateful to say that my guest today is Nancy Adams. She's going to be talking about her son's fight against addiction and ways her tenacity and unconditional love have helped save him along the way. So please feel free to like and subscribe to the podcast on YouTube at my channel, Emotional Grit, and we'll go ahead and get things started. So Nancy, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And of course, I say here, knowing that I'm in cold Minnesota and you're down in Florida. So,
Yes,
I'm happy we can at least hang out virtually. So this is good.
that's right.
So in my book, I have an interview in here where you were kind enough to share just the stories of not only your son and his fight against addiction, but for you as a caregiver, how it affected you as well, and just kind of the journey, along the way, and wanting to help other people, give them a sense of hope with whatever they're going through. So if you could please take the listeners back to when your son was, I believe, 15, if I'm not mistaken, when you
Yes.
first found out what was going on. What do you think initially kind of helped mask the addiction, and how did you finally kind of find out about it?
Well, I think what helped mask the addiction was my denial.
Mhm.
We have two sons, and they're 5 years apart. And when we raised our oldest son, um, I just thought, well, this parenting is easy. I mean, he's a rule follower. Graduated from high school, went on to college, played college basketball, and got married. I thought, well, it'll go the same with my second child. And so I think I know that I was in denial for a long time with my son until actually there were just too many things hitting us in the face that did not add up.
So if I remember correctly from the book, you talked about how he'd be caught skipping school, and just kind of collectively after a while, it's kind of like, wait a minute here, something's a little off. What was his excuse for when he would skip school? Like, did he have excuses each time, or did it make you
He
not believe?
he absolutely had every excuse in the world. And at first when this all starts, you want to believe your child. It didn't make sense, but it's like, well, that doesn't really make sense. But you want to believe them until things have just kept happening and happening and happening. And then some shady friends start coming around, and things just went downhill from there.
Wow. So was that something where you initially kind of confronted him, or did he admit to something, or did you overhear a conversation, or what was it? What was kind of that pivotal moment where all of a sudden you realized, wait a minute here, there's drugs involved?
I don't know if there was one pivotal moment. It was just many, many until we actually had to finally deal with something. And yeah, we had to take the bull by the horns and do something about it.
Oh yeah.
Um, you know, I I still to this day credit my parents as to the way they raised me, that you never ever give up on your children. So I had a good baseline, and I hung in there and tried to help him.
Wow. Yeah, obviously it takes a lot of strength and patience sometimes, but that unconditional love, to help you move forward, and not just to help him with what he's experiencing, but also to help yourself, as well,
Absolutely. Yes.
to get
And
through.
and I didn't even figure there was a plan B. There was no plan B. We had to hit it head on and try to I don't know, correct or fix the situation. I guess that's a good way to put it in the beginning. You want to fix it. But it's really hard to fix.
Yeah.
But you just have to stick with it.
Oh yeah. Well, I do want to read a couple excerpts from the book about your story, so we could talk about them with the listeners. The first thing that I have that I wanted to discuss here is: the coming years would bring shady friends, jail, and even prison into Casey's life. With the help of the police, Casey's girlfriend, and parole officers, Nancy learned where the haunts were around town where people would buy and sell drugs. They lived in Grand Forks, North Dakota, so on some cold winter nights, she would leave home in her robe and pajamas and drive around looking for him in weather that was well below zero. After he didn't come home one night, he walked in the door the next day, just as she was about to call the police to report him missing. She later found out that he had been held captive by drug dealers who were convinced that he was withholding information about them or from them. Unable to answer their questions, he had spent the night in the trunk of their car as they drove around Grand Forks threatening him.
That's all true, unfortunately.
I can't get my head around that. So did he even know who those people were, and how did they find him, and what happened?
Well, he hasn't divulged those details with us. And in fact, when I first heard that story, my whole mind just went into denial. The thought my child was held captive in the trunk of a car, was driven around all night. And there was a long, long time. If my husband would bring that story up, I would say, you can't talk about that. I can't, it was so painful. But it was the truth, and it happened, and he was around a lot of shady people. In fact, I remember one night, my husband and I were home, and he had to go into work for a while, and something had happened, and I don't know exactly what it was, but there had been cars driving by the house or something, and I was standing at the window, and I called my husband at work. I said, "You've got to come home. I am so scared." I was just so scared that they would either come in the house or do something, that I had him come home, actually. And then there was another time when my husband was out of town. I went and slept at the neighbor's house. I mean, that's when things were really bad, after he had been to drug treatment facilities. And, along with taking drugs, you break the law. And I think I've told you before, I don't make excuses for him breaking the law. If you break the law, you've got to pay the consequences. So, I mean, we would visit him in jail, in county jail, in prisons, um, but we just tried to be there and be supportive, and it got real ugly at times.
Oh, I bet. Did he ever say what it was, or why the people let him out of the trunk of the car? I mean, he couldn't give them the answers they wanted, but
No, I think that
yeah.
they tried. I think that he finally convinced them that he didn't know anything. But I mean, even going back, I remember at one point I said to him, "Why did you even try drugs? Why did you do drugs? I'm not a risk taker. Your father's not a risk taker. We wouldn't have even tried them." And he kind of shrugged his shoulders and said, "I don't know. I just wanted to see what it was like." But then he did
Mhm.
add, "I was addicted from the first time I took them."
Wow. Now, with the drugs, did he escalate them? Like maybe at one point it was marijuana, and then at some
Yes,
point it ends up with cocaine, or like kind of,
yes, yes, it
wow.
was. And in fact, he was out late one night, and we couldn't find him. And then finally found him, and I said, "I'm taking you to the emergency room. We're going to get a drug test." And he was adamant that he had not been taking drugs. He wasn't using anything. And if I wouldn't have had that will within me, to not be talked out of it this time, that we did go to the emergency room, and I believe they drew his blood. And when we got the results back, he had taken everything: meth, cocaine, hard drugs, prescription drugs. And there's probably been many times we could have lost him. And we thought there was times we would have lost him.
Wow. Well, speaking of which, that's a good segue to another excerpt that I wanted to share with people from the book. The dangers and uncertainties of addiction were more than Nancy could bear. While there were times when she could find her son, other nights she would drive home wondering if he would do the same. One night when he was missing, she sat down to write his obituary. As she did so, she decided that she would publicly disclose the dangers of addiction rather than succumb to them privately. She would later learn that her son was still living, but feelings of ambiguous grief began to overtake her as the boy she once knew was disappearing before her eyes, and trouble continued to ensue. One day, she actually drove to a known drug house, opened the door unannounced, grabbed her son by the shirt, and pulled him out to safety.
That is true. I wouldn't recommend it.
So, 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 so starting with the obituary, would, I mean, just I can't even imagine the emotion, the psychology, even the potential physical pain that would have gone into sitting down to write that. Do you recall what that experience was like?
I do, and in fact, I still have on my computer pieces of it. Um, Things were just so horrible and so bad, and I was thinking that we're going to lose this kid. And I thought, when it happens, it is going to be so devastating that I need to be prepared, which I know sounds really almost crazy, but it had gotten to that point. And in fact, I had also ordered off the internet a GPS that I installed on his car, thinking, okay, if he goes missing again, at least I know where to find him or to track his car. But yes, it was extremely painful. But I just felt like I needed to be prepared. It just got to be that bad. But, and talk about going into somebody's house and, taking him out. I would not recommend it. It was very dangerous.
A drug den.
A
Yeah.
drug den, yes. But I
So,
also had a friend that climbed through a bathroom window to get her daughter out of the house. So you just get so desperate to get them out of that situation, and you just want them home under your roof.
oh yeah. So, how exactly did you find the drug den? Was it his girlfriend that tipped you off, or how did you find it?
Talking to people, his girlfriend, the police, because of course we had a lot of police interaction, having the police come to the house looking for him and stuff. But yeah, and the town that we were living in at the time was 50,000 people, which isn't real big. So it would be easier to find where to look for
Yeah.
him.
So did you have to, for lack of a better way to describe it, kind of like surveil the house first to like get an idea of how many people were possibly in there, or like what did you do?
I turned into the Tasmanian devil, is what I call it. And I think by this time they were all kind of passed out, and it was real late at night and everybody was pretty mellow. So, the mama bear just kicks in. And like a friend of mine said, you could have gotten hurt. And indeed, I could have gotten hurt, but you just get to the point that you just don't care. You don't care about yourself. You just want to get him out. So,
So that makes me think of the title of my book as far as being greater than, because your love for your son was greater than and is greater than your love for yourself. It's
absolutely.
you
And
know
and and that's what my parents taught me without saying it. I always knew that they loved me to the core. I always knew they would never leave. I always knew that they would just stand by my side. And so that has taught me how to parent my boys. And I think that's where that emotional grit came from within me, is from
oh
my
yeah.
parents and how
I
I
think
was raised.
depending on who the guest is on my show, sometimes I'll ask people, do you think emotional grit is nature or nurture? And I think it's like, for me, I think it's both, but by the way that you're describing it, yeah, a lot of it can come from how you're raised or where you're raised. I mean, even growing up in a cold climate. I mean, you coming from North Dakota, I'm in Minnesota.
Yes,
You can complain about the snow, or just put on your boots and go shovel and just take care of it. You know what I mean?
that's
You
right.
learn to deal with it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a hardy mindset of perseverance. But how old was your son? I guess kind of going back a little bit. How old was he when he was in the trunk of the car?
He
Roughly.
was probably 18 years old. We
Wow.
fought this addiction for 10 years.
Wow. Okay.
And
And
go ahead.
oh no, go ahead.
Okay. And in that 10 years, he went to 7 different drug treatment facilities. Um, it can get very costly to go. And it wasn't until the 8th one that kind of really helped him, because it was long term. So I really have an opinion on how long. There's many drug treatment facilities that are 28 days. And my just in my opinion, that's like spitting into the ocean. It's just
Mhm.
not long enough. So
Yeah.
the last drug treatment facility he went to was 2 years. He was there for
Wow.
2 years.
Wow.
But that's what you need, is long-term care. And it was in another state.
Oh, that helps. Because I would imagine if you're anywhere near your friends, it's hard to break those ties, with people who
Yes,
are still in the drug world and not as strong as you want to be when it comes to addiction. So being out of state, I would
well,
think would help,
yes,
you
yeah,
know.
it did. And we did not tell anybody where he was at that time. So
Wow.
it's a great drug treatment facility because it's long-term, and it's not a country club, facility. It's, you work when you're there, and
I was
what
gonna
you need.
say, if I remember correctly, isn't it kind of like the new people have certain duties, and then as you either the longer you're there or you somehow put in your time, they can get maybe the more desirable
Yes,
duties?
yes, yeah, you do.
Wow.
When you first go, you're serving the meals, you're doing the dishes, you're cleaning the toilets and things like that. And then the longer you're there and you get more privileges, maybe then you can start cooking the meals and things like that. But I do remember him telling me a story one time that um, another kid came in, and the facility that he was at was all men, and we preferred that. We wanted all the same sex. But anyway, so they got another resident in, and they didn't have a bed, so they were given 2x4s, and you just pound them together and put a mattress on, and now that is his bed. So like I said,
Wow.
it was not a country club type situation.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I don't believe in the country club type situations
Yeah, yeah,
myself,
yeah.
you know. And then I remember
Wow.
saying to him, it was in an old naval reserve in South Carolina. And so I said to him, Casey, have you ever seen anybody, in my naive type of way, Casey, have you ever seen anybody leave, just up and leave? He goes, Mom, I've seen so many guys walk down the road and just leave, that they
Wow.
just gave up. They just didn't want the help. But
Wow.
he was court ordered to be there. If he left, he would have been arrested because he was on probation.
Okay.
So
So, so I know you mentioned that you obviously have another son who's 5 years older. And how did this affect him when they were growing up? I imagine a lot of attention would have gone toward Casey. And so I'm wondering, even though there was a 5 year age difference, did he feel like he wasn't getting the attention that he wanted as well?
absolutely. Um, Fortunately, since they're 5 years apart, my oldest son was off to college when all this started. But then as the years wore on, and we were giving all our attention to Casey, and finally my oldest son said, mentioned it to me that he felt a little bit slighted, and he didn't approve of what his younger son was doing. And I just looked at him and I said, we're trying to save his life. I'm really sorry if we've got to put all our energy there, but
Yeah.
we are trying to keep him alive. And that was the truth. And in fact, when he was in jail for the last one, yeah, the last time, I had to go to court because I wanted to talk to the judge about putting him in this facility in South Carolina. And so the judge had to swear me in, and I had to get up on the stand and everything. And again, that Tasmanian devil comes out in you because I'm trying to save my son. And the prosecuting attorney said something in court, and I looked at her and I said, we are trying to save our son's life. We're trying to get him into this facility. So can you just take a step back? And I'm sure people think, well, that was brave of you. No, it was the mother talking in me. You know what?
Mhm.
This kid needs help, and we want him to grow to be an adult that is productive in life. So
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Well, and was it when Casey was in the equivalent of high school or the equivalent of like college age when he came home late one night and sat on the edge of your bed and had
oh,
shared with you, and correct me if I'm wrong, but some of the effect of mom, I don't want to be a black sheep, I don't the black sheep anymore.
I
Like he had this
remember that.
epiphany.
Yes.
How old was he and what kind of gave him that epiphany at that point?
I would say he was about 20 years old at the time. I was sound asleep in my bed, and he came and woke me up, and he was actually crying. And he goes, Mom, I don't want to be the black sheep of the family anymore. And of course, I go into mom mode and I say, well, you're not the black sheep, and we love you very much. And he said, but Mom, my brother graduated from high school and from college. My cousins have graduated from high school. And I just feel like the black sheep of the family. And that just really hit me, um, about how he was feeling.
Yeah.
He was feeling like a failure, and
Mhm.
probably no matter what I said, made any difference. But we sure paid attention to that, and it was not how we were feeling anymore. It was he's he's living a tough life of this addiction, and addiction is a special kind of hell.
Oh,
Is
yeah.
how is how I put it.
Yep, no, I could see that. So, has Casey ever said if there was something in particular that made his eighth time in treatment like the one that finally kind of gave him a renewed lease on life? What was it kind of an accumulation of things from different times in treatment, or was there something special about the eighth time that kind of was the charm for him?
He actually said to me that when we went to South Carolina, and just to back up a few places, he went to the Delancey house in South Carolina, and there's 6 different locations across the United States for this Delancey house. we chose Charleston. No, for no particular reason. We just thought it would be a good fit. But he told me later, and then we had to fly him down there. What they do is interview him, and if he's not serious about getting sober, they don't admit him. And plus, he's on
Ah,
probation. So not only did we need to get him admitted to that house, we needed to have the probation officer take him on. And so anyway, we got that all done. And he told me after about, probably over a year of being in there, he said, when you took me here, I thought, well, I'll go through the motions again. And then when I get out, I'm going to start using again. But it was that long-term care
yeah.
that these addicts need. It's
Wow.
it's essential.
What were some things that you experienced, dare I say, socially? When in a town of 50,000 people, where
Uh-huh.
everyone's going to have an opinion, um,
Absolutely.
are there certain things that you noticed that made you that how people were treating you, or that they would say about you, that with the gift of hindsight, you've thought, I will never be that person. If I know that someone else has a child or a spouse or a
Yes.
parent who's going through an addiction, then I'm doing the opposite of so and so. Like, what were some of those things you experienced that you know that were not so ideal?
Well, there's a number of them, but one of them that I remember, I was sitting around with my friends, and it was this sounds really menial, but it was during prom time, and my son was in jail, and they were all talking about prom and what their the dates that they had and the dresses that they were going to wear, and it was just like somebody was putting this knife in my chest and just putting it in further and further and
Yeah,
further, because my son's not going to the prom, which again seems menial, but it's all part of growing up. It's all a
yeah,
part of high
yeah,
school.
yeah.
And I was looking at him like, could you guys just stop and think about what you're saying and here, it was very hurtful, and there was many different hurtful things. But um, and then towards the end, when people would say, how's Casey doing? And I kind of got to the point. I said, I'll be really honest with you and tell you how he's doing, but my husband and I are doing absolutely everything we can. We are researching everything we can. So, I'm not really looking for advice, but, I'll let you know how he's doing. And again, that probably sounded so terrible, but really that's how I felt,
Right, right.
because I was getting a lot of free advice on
Yeah,
what to
right.
do, what to do. Yeah.
A lot of unsolicited advice. Yes.
Unsolicited advice.
Yeah.
Yes.
Um, on the other hand, what were some things that helped you along the way? As far as just kind of, maybe someone validated how you were feeling by saying something, or maybe somebody uh, brought over dinner one night and said, "Hey, you know what? I'll go run some errands for you. You guys stay in and have a nice meal as a family." Or what were just some things that people have done along the way to try to help that worked?
I guess I still get back to my parents. They still stood beside me through this whole thing. And for a long time, I tried to hide it from them, thinking, well, they're older and all this. These older people are resilient. They
Oh yeah,
my,
oh yeah.
my parents stood alongside me and my husband, and were very supportive. I know when Casey was in jail, I said to my dad, "Dad, will you write him a letter of support?" And my
Wow.
mother told me later, she said, "Your father spent a lot of time writing that letter." So I
Wow.
would say it was my parents, um, that really stood beside me.
Well, and you know what? Your dad had to have really felt honored and flattered for you to ask him to do that, because you wouldn't have asked just anybody to do that. Obviously you knew
No,
that by him writing a letter was going to carry some weight with Casey.
yes, it was.
So
Yes, in
that,
case
that's
he respected my
that's cool.
father. Yes. And
Wow.
in fact, my father passed away like 14 years ago, and to this day I could cry talking.
Mhm.
He was just such a wonderful person and a wonderful father, and the same with my mother. Just,
Wow.
I knew they loved us all to the core.
That's really cool. I know, my parents are divorced, and my mom worked in a memory care unit at a nursing home. So working with people that had dementia wasn't always the easiest. I mean, there was
No,
one guy that tried to like clock her across the chin, and
yes,
somebody else tried breaking her wrists, and because people just don't know what they're doing.
right.
And she also worked split shifts. So sometimes it might be midnights, sometimes it might be afternoons. So sleeping was kind of hit or miss. But she would always say to my brother, and me, that if we ever wanted to like knock on her bedroom door, because maybe it's like something on our heart or something on our mind that we wanted to share, she would always say, I wanted you to come to me as you were growing up so that you would know you could come to me as you got older. You know, kind of like if you plant
Yes,
if you plant those seeds now, you know, you're gonna reap what you sow later.
yes.
And she really wanted to do that for us. And our dad's always been very supportive as well. So it's just but that's not always the case for people. So I'm happy for you that your parents are very supportive and that you in turn were able to be supportive for Casey. That's huge.
Well,
So
and I didn't realize until honestly I was in my 20s that not everybody was raised with warm, loving parents, which
yeah,
sounds so naive, right?
it's
But
true. Mhm.
yeah, I was very
It's-
blessed to be raised where I was by the parents that raised me.
oh
Yes.
yeah. So where's Casey today? So
Uh,
what's going on today?
Good news. Uh, the middle of December, we attended his college graduation. He graduated with a degree in computer science
Very cool.
from Charleston Southern University.
Wow.
And so, of course, we were all there to cheer him on. Uh, I, we went into the auditorium. From the time I sat down until it was over, I cried the whole time.
Wow.
It's just been such a journey, and we're so proud of him. And it's when he was going through his addiction, I'd always sleep literally with one eye opening
Yeah.
at night. You're always on high alert.
Mm.
And I'm not on high alert anymore, but he's had quite a past and is an addict. Things could happen, but I do sleep at night now, but
Cool.
I'm careful.
Yes, yes, I can see that. So is there anything that I haven't asked that I should be? Anything, whether it's resources for people or things about your story, whether it be from your perspective or from Casey's perspective, anything that you want to share with listeners as we close things out?
Well, I guess, I mentioned that Delancey house. It is called the Delancey Street Foundation, and you can look it up on the internet. It's a 2-year program. He actually stayed 2.5 years because he was court ordered, but I just can't say enough about long-term care for addiction. This 28 days and maybe 30 days in a sober house, just in our instance, was not enough. So
Wow.
I think it just really saved his life. And the Delancey and the good thing about the Delancey house is, believe me, we spent a lot of money with wrecked cars, court fees, all of the above.
Mhm.
You go to the Delancey house and you work, so there's no money out of pocket. And so they have a moving company that they run. At Christmas time, they sell Christmas trees. They have a landscaping business, so it's all self-contained.
So it's
And
more
support,
accessible. It's
it's accessible to anybody. You
yeah,
don't have
yeah.
to support,
Wow. That's
but it's
fantastic
huge.
because
It's huge.
oh yeah, I could see that. So the last thing that I want to ask is if hypothetically, if Casey saw this podcast, what would you want to say to him?
Oh my goodness. What first comes to my mind, I get tears in my eyes. We love you to the core, Casey.
Mhm.
And you know what? I always told him that. We love you. We are never going to give up on you. I don't care what you say. I don't care what you do. We will never give up on you. And I told him that through the whole process. So he knew
Wow.
it.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm not afraid. We are not afraid to say we love him
That's
and
that's
say
a
it
gift.
often.
That's
I
a
know.
gift.
Yeah, I think it is because not everybody can do it. But again, my mom and dad told me that they loved me all the time and they
Mhm.
meant it. So
Mhm.
he knows we mean it. And we
Well,
have a very close relationship with him now. He calls often. We call
cool.
him. So
That's
it's great.
fantastic. Well, and it's a good reminder that the best things in life are free. You know, that the
Yeah.
idea of unconditional love. And for you serving as a mama grizzly bear, you know,
Yes.
again, the tenacity, the desire, the selfless love, and the willingness to put your own needs, secondary to his is
Absolutely.
amazing.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
All right, well then we'll go ahead and close things out then. But thank you so much for sharing the story. I appreciate that because it's very inspirational and it's great to just share these stories and the resources with the listeners as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Sure. And to those of you who are listening, thank you for being here as well. And again, for more episodes, please feel free to go to YouTube to my Emotional Grit station and go ahead and like and subscribe. Thanks, everyone.